I'm Alex Thompson, and today I want to tell you about a case that began as every parent's worst nightmare and became the most heavily reported missing person case in modern history. On May 3, 2007, a 3-year-old British girl named Madeleine McCann vanished from her family's holiday apartment in Portugal. What started as a desperate search by her parents has consumed 18 years, cost over £13 million in police investigations, and captivated the attention of the entire world. Madeleine McCann's face became one of the most recognizable in the world. Her distinctive blonde hair and unique eye marking, a rare condition called coloboma that created a black smudge in her right iris, appeared on missing person posters from London to Morocco. Celebrities like J.K. Rowling, Simon Cowell, and David Beckham offered rewards. Her parents met with the Pope. The case generated thousands of reported sightings across multiple continents. But despite one of the largest international investigations ever mounted, despite advanced forensic technology, despite millions of pounds and countless police hours, Madeleine McCann has never been found. Until recently, this seemed destined to remain one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. But in June 2025, something changed. I found myself standing in Portuguese scrubland, watching German investigators use ground-penetrating radar to search areas around an abandoned cottage. They're looking for evidence that could finally solve this case, evidence connected to a convicted rapist who was living in that very cottage when Madeleine disappeared. After 18 years, investigators believed they may finally know what happened to Madeleine McCann. This is that story. April 28, 2007, a perfect family holiday. Dr. Kate McCann and Dr. Jerry McCann seemed to have it all. Both successful physicians from Leicestershire, England, they were taking their first foreign holiday with their 3 young children. 3-year-old Madeleine was bright and precocious, just days away from her 4th birthday. 2-year-old twins Sean and Amelie completed what friends described as a loving, close-knit family. The Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, was perfect for families. Located on the Algarve coast, it offered children's clubs, tennis courts, swimming pools, and the kind of relaxed atmosphere that allowed parents to unwind while keeping their children entertained and safe. The McCanns were traveling with 7 family friends and their children, all medical professionals taking a well-deserved break. For 5 days, it was exactly the holiday they'd hoped for. The children played at the kids' club during the day. The families enjoyed the Portuguese sunshine, good food, and each other's company. They had no idea they were being watched. May 3, 2007, the last normal day. Thursday, May 3rd began like every other day of their holiday. The children went to the kids' club in the morning while the adults relaxed by the pool. The family had lunch together in their ground-floor apartment, 5A in Block 5 of the Waterside Village Gardens complex. That afternoon, Madeleine and the twins returned to the kids' club where they had dinner at 5:30 p.m. Kate collected them at 6 p.m. and brought them back to the apartment while Jerry went for a tennis lesson. Around 6:30 p.m., family friend David Payne stopped by to check on Kate and the children. Everything seemed normal. The children were happy, Kate was relaxed, and the holiday continued its peaceful rhythm. At 7 p.m., Jerry returned from tennis. Together, he and Kate gave the children their baths and put them to bed in the front bedroom. Madeleine slept in a single bed next to the bedroom door. The twins were placed in travel cots in the middle of the room. The bedroom had one window with curtains and a metal exterior shutter. The McCanns kept both the curtains and shutter closed throughout their stay. The window looked out onto a narrow walkway and residence car park, separated from the street by a low wall. At breakfast that morning, Madeleine had asked her parents something that would later haunt them. "Why didn't you come when my brother and I cried last night?" At the time, they thought nothing of it. Children often had confusing dreams or mixed up different nights. But later, Kate and Jerry would wonder if someone had already entered their apartment, if someone had already been watching their family, learning their routines, planning.
8:30 p.m. The tapas restaurant. As they had every night of their holiday, the McCanns left their sleeping children and walked to the resort's tapas restaurant. It was just 55 meters away, close enough that they felt comfortable with their system of regular checks, but far enough that they couldn't hear if the children woke up. They joined their 7 friends at a table on the restaurant's terrace. From their seats, they could see their apartment block, though not their specific apartment or bedroom window. The group had developed a routine over the week. Every 30 minutes, one of the parents would walk back to check on all the children in their various apartments. It seemed like a reasonable compromise between adult relaxation and parental responsibility. The dinner began normally. Wine was ordered. Conversations flowed about their holiday experiences, their plans for the remaining days, their lives back in England. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann volunteered for the first check of the evening. 9:05 p.m. First check. All clear. Jerry walked back to apartment 5A, used his key to unlock the front door, and went straight to the children's bedroom. All 3 were sleeping peacefully. Madeleine was lying in her bed exactly as they'd left her. The twins were quiet in their cots. Nothing seemed wrong. Nothing seemed out of place. Jerry returned to the restaurant and told the group that all was well. The dinner continued. But someone was watching. Someone had been studying the family's routines for days, possibly weeks. Someone knew exactly when the apartment would be empty, exactly how long they had, exactly which child they wanted.
9:30 p.m. The second check. Matthew Oldfield, one of the family friends, offered to check on the McCann children when he went to look in on his own. He entered apartment 5A through the front door and noticed immediately that the children's bedroom door was wide open. This was unusual. The McCanns typically left it only slightly ajar, but Oldfield could hear no sounds of distress, no crying or movement. Without looking far enough into the room to actually see the beds, he assumed everything was fine and left. Later, this moment would be analyzed endlessly. Had Madeleine already been taken? Was the bedroom door open because someone had just carried her out? If Oldfield had looked more carefully, would he have discovered she was missing 30 minutes earlier? Back at the restaurant, Oldfield mentioned that the bedroom door had been open, but no one thought much of it. Children move around. Doors get pushed open. It seemed insignificant. The dinner continued. More wine was poured. The conversation grew more animated as the evening progressed. None of them knew that these were the final moments of their normal lives. 10 p.m. The discovery. Kate McCann stood up from the table. "I'll just pop back and check on the kids." The walk to apartment 5A took less than 2 minutes. She used her key to enter through the front door and walked down the short hallway toward the children's bedroom. The door was wide open. As she approached the room, Kate could see that the window was open. The exterior shutter was raised. A slight breeze was moving the curtains. And Madeleine's bed was empty. 10 p.m. The discovery. Kate McCann's heart stopped. She rushed to the twins' cots. Sean and Amelie were still there, sleeping soundly, undisturbed. But Madeleine, who had been wearing light-colored Marks & Spencer pajamas with a pink floral pattern, was gone. Kate searched frantically around the small apartment. She checked the bathroom, the living room, every possible hiding spot a 3-year-old might choose. She called Madeleine's name, hoping to hear a giggle or see her daughter emerge from some game of hide-and-seek. Nothing. The apartment was eerily quiet, except for the gentle breathing of the twins and the sound of Kate's increasingly panicked footsteps.
She ran back to the tapas restaurant, her voice carrying across the resort complex in a scream that would haunt everyone who heard it. "Madeleine's gone! Someone's taken her!" The immediate response. Jerry McCann was on his feet instantly, sprinting toward the apartment with Kate close behind. The other diners, Matthew and Rachel Oldfield, Russell O'Brien and Jane Tanner, David and Fiona Payne, Diane Webster, abandoned their meals and followed. Within minutes, the Ocean Club Resort erupted into organized chaos. Staff members grabbed flashlights and began coordinating search teams. Other guests, many of them parents themselves, immediately understood the gravity of the situation and joined the search without being asked. The resort's night manager contacted the Portuguese police while search teams spread out across Praia de Luz. Voices calling, "Madeleine!" echoed through the narrow streets of the fishing village. Flashlight beams swept across the beach, through gardens, around parked cars, and into any space large enough for a frightened 3-year-old to hide. But even in those first frantic minutes, a horrible reality was settling in. This wasn't a case of a curious toddler wandering off. The open window, the raised shutter, and the undisturbed twins, everything pointed to an abduction.
Police arrival and early evidence. The Portuguese police arrived at 10:30 p.m., exactly 30 minutes after Kate's discovery. The Polícia Judiciária detectives followed at 11:10 p.m. By then, dozens of people had walked through apartment 5A. Resort staff, the McCann group, other guests, and police officers had all trampled through what should have been a protected crime scene. Any fingerprints, DNA evidence, or physical traces left by an intruder were likely compromised or destroyed. What the investigators found was both telling and frustratingly limited. The bedroom window had been opened from the inside. There was no damage to the frame, no scratches on the metal shutter mechanism. Whoever opened it had done so deliberately and carefully. The front door showed no signs of forced entry. The lock was intact, and there were no scratches or damage around the handle. There were no obvious signs of a struggle in the bedroom. Madeleine's bed wasn't disheveled beyond what you'd expect from a sleeping child. Her favorite stuffed animal, a pink toy cat called Cuddle Cat, was still on the bed. Most disturbing of all, the twins had slept through everything. Despite the commotion of the search, the bright flashlights, and the numerous people entering and leaving the apartment, Sean and Amelie remained deeply asleep. Some would later speculate whether they had been sedated, though no evidence was ever found to support this theory. The witnesses emerge. As the search continued through the night, 2 crucial witness accounts emerged that would shape the investigation for years to come. Jane Tanner's sighting. Jane Tanner, one of the Tapas 9, told police she had seen something significant at approximately 9:15 p.m. She had been walking back to the restaurant after checking on her own daughter when she spotted a man carrying a child near the McCann apartment. The man was walking away from the Ocean Club complex, heading toward the outer edge of the resort. The child in his arms appeared to be wearing light-colored pajamas and seemed to be asleep or unconscious, arms dangling limply, no movement or resistance. Tanner described the man as approximately 5'7" to 5'10", with dark hair, wearing dark clothing. She couldn't see his face clearly, but she was certain about what she had witnessed. An adult male carrying a young child at a time when all the resort's children should have been asleep in their beds. For years, this sighting would become the cornerstone of the investigation. Police sketches were drawn based on Tanner's description. International appeals were launched featuring artists' impressions of the suspect. The image of this mysterious man became the face investigators associated with Madeleine's abductor.
The Smith family sighting. The second sighting came from Martin and Mary Smith, an Irish couple vacationing in Praia de Luz with their family. At approximately 10 p.m., around the same time Kate McCann was discovering Madeleine's empty bed, the Smiths were walking back to their apartment
when they encountered a man carrying a child. This sighting was different from Tanner's in crucial ways. It was closer to the beach, further from the Ocean Club. The timing coincided perfectly with the discovery of Madeleine's disappearance, and unlike Tanner's distant view, the Smiths got a much closer look at both the man and the child. The man appeared to be in his mid-30s, about 5'7" to 5'9", with a slim to normal build and short brown hair. He was wearing cream or beige trousers and appeared uncomfortable carrying the child, as if he wasn't used to holding children or the child was heavier than expected. The little girl had blonde hair and pale skin. She was wearing light-colored pajamas and was barefoot. Most significantly, she appeared to be about 3 or 4 years old, exactly Madeleine's age. The man didn't look like a tourist, the Smiths later told police. There was something urgent about his movement, something that didn't seem quite right. But at the time, they had no reason to suspect anything sinister was happening. It wasn't until the next day, when news of Madeleine's disappearance spread throughout Praia da Luz, that the Smith family realized they may have witnessed the abduction in progress. The critical hours. Between 10 p.m. on May 3rd and sunrise on May 4th, Portuguese police conducted their initial investigation. They photographed the apartment, interviewed the McCann group and resort staff, and began expanding their search beyond the immediate area. But crucial hours were passing. If Madeleine had been taken by car, she could already be hundreds of miles away. If she had been taken by someone with a boat, she could be anywhere along the Mediterranean coast or even across to North Africa. The Algarve region, popular with tourists, also had a transient population of seasonal workers, drifters, and people living on the margins of society. Someone could disappear there easily, especially someone who knew the area well and had planned their escape route. As dawn broke on May 4th, the search expanded to include Portuguese police helicopters, specialist search teams, and coordination with Spanish authorities across the border. But the window of opportunity for finding Madeleine quickly was already closing. The McCann family's holiday was over. Their nightmare was just beginning. And somewhere, investigators would later theorize, a man who had been watching their family for days had successfully executed a plan that would baffle law enforcement for nearly 2 decades. The media storm. Within 24 hours, what had begun as a local missing child case in a small Portuguese fishing village became international front-page news. The story had everything that guaranteed media attention: photogenic parents who were medical professionals, an innocent blonde child with a distinctive and memorable appearance, and a mystery with no clear answers. British tabloids dispatched reporters to Praia da Luz immediately. Sky News, BBC, and ITV sent camera crews. Within days, the sleepy resort town was overrun with journalists from around the world. The McCanns made a decision that would define the next 18 years of their lives. They would use the media attention to find their daughter. On May 5th, just 2 days after Madeleine's disappearance, Kate and Jerry McCann appeared at their first press conference. Kate clutched Cuddle Cat, Madeleine's favorite pink stuffed animal, and spoke directly to whoever had taken her daughter. "Please, if you have Madeleine, let her come home to her mummy, daddy, brother, and sister. As every day goes by, it just gets harder and harder." The image of Kate McCann holding that pink toy cat became iconic, broadcast around the world and printed on millions of newspaper front pages. Going global. What happened next was unprecedented in missing person cases. The Find Madeleine campaign, launched by the McCanns with the help of a professional PR firm, turned their daughter's disappearance into a global phenomenon. Celebrity supporters emerged almost immediately. J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series, donated money and publicly appealed for information. Simon Cowell, then at the height of his fame with American Idol and The X Factor, offered financial support. Richard Branson, the Virgin Group billionaire, contributed to the reward fund. Football superstars David Beckham and Cristiano Ronaldo recorded video appeals that were broadcast across Europe.
The appeals were translated into multiple languages and distributed internationally. The McCanns embarked on a European tour that resembled a political campaign more than a typical missing person search. They met with government officials in Spain, Germany, and the Netherlands. In Rome, Pope Benedict XVI blessed a photograph of Madeleine and promised to pray for her safe return. Madeleine's image appeared on electronic billboards in Times Square, on the sides of buses in London, and on milk cartons across Europe. Her face became one of the most recognizable in the world. The first suspect. On May 14th, 11 days after Madeleine's disappearance, Portuguese police made their first arrest. Robert Murat, a 34-year-old British-Portuguese dual national who lived near the Ocean Club with his mother, was declared an arguido, a formal suspect under Portuguese law. Murat had been acting as an unofficial translator for police and journalists in the days after Madeleine's disappearance, and his eagerness to help had aroused suspicion. Police searched his mother's house with ground-penetrating radar and sniffer dogs. They dismantled his garden, examined his computers, and questioned him for hours. British tabloids declared him the prime suspect and published detailed speculation about his possible involvement. But no evidence connected Murat to Madeleine's disappearance. No forensic traces, no witness identifications, no suspicious behavior beyond his willingness to help with the investigation. After months of scrutiny, he was eventually cleared and received substantial libel damages from British newspapers. The Murat investigation represented the first in what would become a long series of false leads, mistaken identities, and investigative dead ends that would characterize the case for years to come. The Portuguese investigation struggles. Behind the scenes, the Portuguese investigation was encountering serious problems. The crime scene had been compromised within hours of the discovery. Dozens of people had walked through apartment 5A before it was properly secured, potentially destroying crucial evidence. The initial police response, while quick, hadn't followed proper forensic protocols. Cultural and language barriers complicated the investigation. The McCann group spoke no Portuguese, and many of the initial police officers spoke limited English. Crucial early interviews were conducted through interpreters, creating opportunities for miscommunication and misunderstanding. Portuguese police were also overwhelmed by the international media attention. Reporters followed investigators, photographed evidence, and published details that should have remained confidential. The intense scrutiny made it difficult for police to conduct a normal investigation. Most problematically, the investigation began to fragment into competing theories with insufficient evidence to support any of them conclusively. The sightings began. As Madeleine's image spread globally, reported sightings began pouring in from around the world. A woman in Morocco claimed to have seen a child matching Madeleine's description at a petrol station near Marrakesh on May 9th. The child had allegedly asked a man in English, "Can we see Mummy soon?" When the witness returned to Spain and learned about the disappearance, she contacted police. Sightings were reported from Spain, France, Belgium, Malta, and across North Africa. Each one required investigation, resources, and follow-up. Each one raised the McCann's hopes before ultimately leading nowhere. The most credible early sighting came from a Norwegian woman who provided detailed descriptions and seemed genuinely convinced she had seen Madeleine. Kate and Jerry McCann themselves traveled to Morocco on June 10th to investigate, meeting with British embassy officials and local police. But like all the others, the Moroccan lead ultimately went nowhere. The investigation takes a dark turn. By late summer 2007, the Portuguese investigation had stalled. No credible suspects had emerged. No physical evidence had been found outside the apartment. The trail was growing colder with each passing day. Then, on August 11th, exactly 100 days after Madeleine's disappearance, Portuguese police made a stunning public admission. They acknowledged for the first time that Madeleine might be dead. This marked a fundamental shift in the investigation. Instead of a rescue mission, they were now potentially looking at a murder case. Instead of searching for a living child, they might be looking for a body. But the most shocking development was yet to come. Portuguese police had been re-examining evidence from apartment 5A and the McCann's rental car with advanced forensic techniques. Based on their interpretation of DNA evidence and sniffer dog alerts, they began to develop a theory that would divide public opinion and create one of the most controversial aspects of the entire case. On September 7, 2007, exactly 100 days after their daughter's disappearance, Kate and Jerry McCann were called in for questioning as formal suspects in Madeleine's disappearance. The parents who had spent months campaigning for their daughter's safe return were now being accused of causing her death and covering it up.
September 7, 2007. The McCanns become suspects. The interrogation of Kate and Jerry McCann marked one of the most controversial moments in the entire investigation. Jerry was questioned first, followed by Kate in a session that lasted 11 hours. The Portuguese police, led by coordinator Gonzalo Amaral, presented their theory. Madeleine had died in an accident in apartment 5A, and her parents had disposed of her body to avoid blame. The evidence they cited was primarily based on alerts from British sniffer dogs and DNA analysis that they claimed supported their theory. Eddie and Keela, two specialist dogs brought in from Britain, had reportedly alerted to the scent of human blood and cadaver odor in apartment 5A and in the McCann's rental car, a Renault Scenic they had hired 25 days after Madeleine's disappearance. The Portuguese police interpretation was that Madeleine had died in the apartment. Her body had been hidden temporarily and then moved using the rental car weeks later when the media attention had died down. During her interrogation, Kate McCann was presented with 48 questions, including, "Did you kill your daughter? Where did you hide your daughter's body? Who helped you carry your daughter's body?" Kate refused to answer any of the questions on the advice of her lawyer, exercising her right to remain silent under Portuguese law. This decision would later be criticized by some as suspicious, though legal experts pointed out it was entirely within her rights and recommended legal strategy. The DNA evidence controversy. The case against the McCanns rested heavily on DNA evidence that Portuguese police claimed linked Madeleine to their rental car. British tabloids, fed information by Portuguese police sources, reported dramatic headlines: "Corpse in McCann car" and "Clump of Maddie's hair found in boot." The Daily Star reported that DNA evidence provided a 100% match to Madeleine. But when the actual forensic reports were examined, the evidence was far less conclusive than these headlines suggested. The DNA samples were described by the British Forensic Science Service as too degraded and too partial to draw definitive conclusions. The laboratory that analyzed the samples stated that the results were inconclusive and could not definitively prove Madeleine's DNA was present in the car. Dr. John Lowe from the FSS wrote in his official report that the DNA was too complex to meaningfully interpret and that it was not possible to determine whether the samples came from Madeleine or from other sources. Despite these scientific limitations, the Portuguese police proceeded with their theory that the McCanns were responsible for their daughter's death. Public opinion divides. The revelation that Madeleine's parents were suspects created a media firestorm and sharply divided public opinion. Some supported the Portuguese police theory, pointing to perceived inconsistencies in the McCann statements, their decision to leave 3 young children alone while dining, and Kate's refusal to answer police questions. Others saw the accusations as a desperate attempt by struggling investigators to find a scapegoat. They pointed to the lack of credible forensic evidence, the contaminated crime scene, and the absence of any motive for the McCanns to harm their daughter. British tabloids, which had initially supported the McCanns, began publishing increasingly critical coverage. Headlines questioned their behavior, analyzed their body language, and suggested various theories about their possible involvement. The McCanns hired high-profile lawyers and public relations experts to defend themselves against what they saw as unfounded accusations. They vehemently denied any involvement in their daughter's disappearance and continued to maintain that she had been abducted.
September 9, 2007. Return to Britain. With their suspect status making their position in Portugal untenable, Kate and Gerry McCann returned to Britain with their twins, Sean and Amelie, on September 9, 2007. The scenes at the airport were chaotic, with hundreds of reporters and photographers documenting their departure. The family that had arrived in Portugal for a relaxing holiday was returning under a cloud of suspicion and international media scrutiny. Back in Leicestershire, they faced a dramatically changed situation. Their home was surrounded by media, their every movement was photographed and analyzed, and they were now fighting not just to find their daughter, but to clear their own names. July 21, 2008. Case archived. After months of investigation that failed to produce credible evidence against the McCanns or identify any other viable suspects, Portuguese authorities made a significant decision. On July 21, 2008, Portugal's Attorney General officially archived the case, citing insufficient evidence to proceed with any charges. The arguido status of Kate and Gerry McCann was lifted, as was that of Robert Murat. The official case files were released, revealing the extent of the investigation and the lack of concrete evidence supporting any particular theory about what had happened to Madeleine. Gonzalo Amaral, the Portuguese police coordinator who had led the investigation, was removed from the case months earlier due to his criticism of British police cooperation. He would later publish a book titled The Truth of the Lie, in which he maintained his belief that Madeleine had died in the apartment and that her parents had covered it up. The private investigation era. With the official Portuguese investigation closed, the McCanns took the unprecedented step of funding their own private investigation using money donated to the Find Madeleine Fund. They hired a series of private detective agencies and investigative firms. Método 3, a Spanish agency, was hired for 6 months at £50,000 per month. They put 35 investigators on the case across Europe and Morocco, following up on sightings and developing new leads. Later, they hired Oakley International and other British firms to continue the search. Over several years, the private investigation consumed hundreds of thousands of pounds and generated numerous reports and potential leads. Some of these private investigations produced the witness sketches and EFIT images that would later become crucial to the case, including composite drawings based on the Smith family sighting that wouldn't be released publicly for several years.
Media settlements and legal battles. In March 2008, the McCanns accepted substantial libel damages and front-page apologies from Express newspapers over stories alleging they were involved in Madeleine's disappearance or death. The settlement, reportedly worth over £500,000, was donated to the Find Madeleine Fund. Similar settlements followed with other publications that had published unsubstantiated allegations about the family. These legal victories helped restore some of the McCanns' reputation, but the damage to their public image had been substantial. Surveys showed that a significant portion of the British public still harbored suspicions about their involvement, despite the lack of evidence and the official clearing of their names. The case goes cold. By 2010, 3 years after Madeleine's disappearance, the case had effectively gone cold. The Portuguese investigation was archived, the private investigations had failed to produce breakthrough evidence, and media attention had significantly diminished. Madeleine McCann was no longer front-page news. Her parents had returned to their medical careers, though they continued to campaign for her case to remain active. The twins, now old enough to understand what had happened to their sister, were growing up in the shadow of one of the world's most famous unsolved mysteries. It seemed a case might join the ranks of famous disappearances that are never solved, until an unexpected intervention from the highest levels of British government would give it new life.
2011. Operation Grange begins. 3.5 years after Madeleine's disappearance, the case received an unexpected lifeline from the highest levels of British government. On May 12, 2011, Madeleine's 8th birthday, Kate McCann published a book about their ordeal titled Madeleine, Our Daughter's Disappearance and the Continuing Search for Her. The same day, Prime Minister David Cameron announced that he had asked the Metropolitan Police to conduct a review of all information relating to the case. The decision came after the McCanns had personally written to Cameron requesting British police involvement. Home Secretary Theresa May supported the request, and the Met Police agreed to take on what would become known as Operation Grange. Unlike the Portuguese investigation, Operation Grange would treat Madeleine's disappearance as an abduction by a stranger rather than focusing on the family. Detective Chief Inspector Andy Redwood was appointed to lead the review, with a team initially consisting of 37 officers. New leads and revelations. Operation Grange began by reviewing over 40,000 documents from Portuguese police, British authorities, and private investigators. They re-interviewed witnesses, analyzed phone records, and used new forensic techniques on existing evidence. By 2013, the British team had made several significant discoveries that changed the entire understanding of the case. Most importantly, they eliminated the Jane Tanner sighting that had driven the investigation for 6 years. Through methodical detective work, they tracked down the man Tanner had seen carrying a child at 9:15 p.m. He was a British holidaymaker returning his daughter from the Ocean Club's night crash. When shown the exact route and timing, it perfectly matched Tanner's sighting. With the 9:15 p.m. sighting eliminated, investigators could focus on the Smith family's 10 p.m. sighting, which now appeared to represent the actual time of Madeleine's abduction. Operation Grange also identified 38 people of interest and investigated over 8,000 potential sightings. They examined more than 600 sex offenders and followed numerous leads across Europe and North Africa. In October 2013, on a BBC Crime Watch appeal, the Met released new EFIT images based on the Smith sighting and other witnesses. The images showed a man carrying a child toward the beach at around 10 p.m. on May 3, 2007.
New leads and revelations. Operation Grange began by reviewing over 40,000 documents from Portuguese police, British authorities, and private investigators. They re-interviewed witnesses, analyzed phone records, and used new forensic techniques on existing evidence. By 2013, the British team had made several significant discoveries that changed the entire understanding of the case. Most importantly, they eliminated the Jane Tanner sighting that had driven the investigation for 6 years. Through methodical detective work, they tracked down the man Tanner had seen carrying a child at 9:15 p.m. He was a British holidaymaker returning his daughter from the Ocean Club's night crash. When shown the exact route and timing, it perfectly matched Tanner's sighting. With the 9:15 p.m. sighting eliminated, investigators could focus on the Smith family's 10 p.m. sighting, which now appeared to represent the actual time of Madeleine's abduction. Operation Grange also identified 38 people of interest and investigated over 8,000 potential sightings. They examined more than 600 sex offenders and followed numerous leads across Europe and North Africa. In October 2013, on a BBC Crime Watch appeal, the Met released new EFIT images based on the Smith sighting and other witnesses. The images showed a man carrying a child toward the beach at around 10 p.m. on May 3, 2007. Portuguese case reopened. The British activity prompted Portuguese authorities to reopen their own investigation in October 2013. For the first time since 2008, both British and Portuguese police were actively working the case simultaneously. The Portuguese team, now led by different investigators than the original 2007 team, began following new leads and re-examining old evidence with fresh eyes. However, despite the renewed activity and international cooperation, years passed without a major breakthrough. Operation Grange was scaled back in 2015 from 29 officers to just 4, though it remained active. The German connection. The breakthrough that would transform the case came from an unexpected source, a German television program. In 2013, German crime show Aktenzeichen XY Ungelöst featured the McCann case and appealed for information. The program generated several tips, but one piece of information wouldn't be fully developed until years later. German investigators received information about a convicted sex offender who had been living in the Algarve region around the time of Madeleine's disappearance. The man had a history of burglary, sexual offenses against children, and had lived in a van near Praia da Luz. It took German police years to fully develop this information and connect it to the McCann case. The investigation required painstaking analysis of phone records, vehicle registrations, and criminal history spanning multiple countries. June 3, 2020. The prime suspect. 13 years after Madeleine's disappearance, German prosecutors made an announcement that sent shockwaves around the world. At a press conference in Braunschweig, Germany, prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters revealed that a 43-year-old German man was now the prime suspect in Madeleine McCann's disappearance. More significantly, German prosecutors stated they were treating the case as murder and believed Madeleine was dead. The suspect was Christian Bruckner, a convicted rapist and pedophile who was already serving a 7-year sentence in German prison for raping a 72-year-old American woman in Praia da Luz in 2005. German police revealed crucial evidence linking Bruckner to the crime. His mobile phone had received a 30-minute call at 7:32 p.m. on May 3, 2007, just 1 hour before Madeleine disappeared. Cell phone data showed his phone was in the area around Praia da Luz when the call was made. He had been living in a VW camper van in the area and was known to burglarize holiday apartments and hotel rooms. On May 4, 2007, the day after Madeleine's disappearance, he re-registered his 1993 Jaguar XJR6 to someone else in Germany, though the car remained in Portugal. The evidence against Bruckner. German investigators revealed that Bruckner had extensive connections to the Praia da Luz area. He had lived in the Algarve region between 1995 and 2007, spending time in a house between Lagos and Praia da Luz. He was known to make money through crime, including burglary and drug trafficking. In 2016, police had searched a disused factory in Germany that Bruckner had purchased in 2008. Hidden inside, they found disturbing evidence: children's clothing, USB sticks, and hard drives containing thousands of images, and handwritten accounts describing fantasies of kidnapping children. Most significantly, GPS data from a satellite navigation system found at the property showed Bruckner had visited the Arade Dam area about 30 miles from Praia da Luz multiple times. This location would become the focus of major searches in 2023. Prosecutor Wolters made a stunning claim: "We have evidence that he killed Madeleine McCann. We cannot say why we are sure she is dead, but we are sure." However, despite this confidence, German prosecutors admitted they didn't yet have enough evidence to formally charge Bruckner with Madeleine's murder.
2025, the search continues. Which brings us back to where I started this story. Standing in Portuguese scrubland in June 2025, watching German investigators search for evidence that could finally solve this case. The search is conducted between June 3rd and 5th, 2025, focused on areas around the cottage where Bruckner was living in 2007. Using ground-penetrating radar capable of scanning 15 feet underground,
Teams scoured wells, ditches, and abandoned buildings. Portuguese, German, and British authorities worked together in what many observers believed could be the final push to find definitive evidence against Bruckner before his scheduled release from German prison in September 2025. As I write this, Bruckner remains behind bars, but time is running out. His acquittal on unrelated sexual offense charges in October 2024 dashed prosecutors' hopes of extending his detention. German authorities are in a race against time to build a case strong enough to formally charge him with Madeleine's murder. The Metropolitan Police's Operation Grange continues, now funded through 2026 with a small team of dedicated officers. After $13.2 million and 14 years of investigation, they remain committed to finding answers for the McCann family. 18 years later, on May 12, 2025, Madeleine McCann would have turned 22 years old. Her parents, Kate and Jerry, marked the day with a simple message on social media. Happy 21st birthday, Madeleine. Still missing, still missed, still looking. The twins, Sean and Emily, are now 20 years old. They've grown up in the shadow of their sister's disappearance, their entire lives shaped by an event they were too young to remember. In their statement marking the 18th anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance, Kate and Jerry McCann wrote, "The years appear to be passing even more quickly, and whilst we have no significant news to share, our determination to leave no stone unturned is unwavering." The questions that remain. Despite everything, the millions spent, the thousands of investigators, the global attention, fundamental questions about what happened on May 3, 2007 remain unanswered. If Christian Bruckner is responsible, as German prosecutors believe, how did he know about the McCann family's routine? How did he enter apartment 5A without leaving forensic evidence? Where is Madeleine now? The case that began as a family holiday in a Portuguese resort has become one of the most investigated disappearances in history. It has changed laws about media reporting, influenced police procedures for missing children cases, and kept the spotlight on child safety for nearly 2 decades. But for Kate and Jerry McCann, it remains heartbreakingly simple. They want to know what happened to their daughter. As the searches in Portugal continue and Christian Bruckner's release date approaches, the world watches to see if the Madeleine McCann case will finally reach its conclusion, or if it will join the ranks of mysteries that are never fully solved. 18 years after a 3-year-old girl vanished from her bed in Praia da Luz, the search for answers continues. This has been Alex Thompson, and this is the story of Madeleine McCann.